Both the big cameras. Okay, so we'll sync those up. We're waiting on, we're live actually on YouTube, which is very exciting. So we can type that up. We're about 2 minutes from starting. I've got Stevie Don with me, Chuck Inman, and Valerie Riefenstahl. And we're talking about emotional intelligence. And you know what? I haven't met anyone that's not emotionally intelligent. Aren't we all emotionally intelligent one way or another? Well, I think our experts are here to talk to us about that. When I think about emotional intelligence, I think about what it means to making deals, right? Because if I'm in the boardroom and it's about deliverables and about money, how emotionally intelligent am I? I think about emotional intelligence when I think about being online. I'm 1 minute from going live. Let's bring my Facebook live, if you will. We're thrilled that everyone's with us today. We're standing by on that to go live. Moments away. Welcome to Bean Technology and dealing with all the different things we got to go. Hey, thank you all for being here on this edition of Inside Fort Worth Business. I'm your host, Chris Quinn. What a great day today it is. Today we're talking about effective communication through emotional intelligence. What does that really mean and what does that all look like? And over the next 30 minutes with my panel of experts, we're going to be talking about that. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram today. Follow the conversation at Fort Worth Today at hashtag Your Emotional Intelligence, YEI. And we are live on all those channels, correct, Kyle? I just had a smell. Not on Instagram. Let me take that back. So, pardon the interruption. So, we do have some inserts that will be coming on that, and thanks for that clarification. First of all, I've got Stevie Don, who is a nationally actually, first of all, I have Valerie Riefenstahl. Valerie is a certified facilitator and high impact trainer and founder of the Alternative Board of Greater Fort Worth and ROI and Associates. Thank you for being with us. We have Dr. Stevie Don, who's a nationally sought after speaker on emotional intelligence, an expert in leadership communication. She's also CEO of and founder of Orange Compass. And finally, my longtime friend Chuck Inman, who is a business coach at Crystal Clear Motivation and author of Control, Chemical Brain Freeze, and Nimble, How to Lead Above the Turmoil. Thank you all for being with us today. Yeah. Looking forward to talking about this. What we'll do is we've got a number of topics that we want to talk about. We'll spend about three or four minutes on each section, and then we'll move on to the next section. So follow the conversation at hashtag at YEI, Your Emotional Intelligence. So important, and thank you for all being with us today. Valerie, let's talk about you. When we talk about emotional intelligence, everyone's emotionally intelligent. They like to think they are. What does emotional intelligence mean to you?
Well, emotional intelligence begins, even in very young children, they begin to interact with their world. They understand when somebody's sad, hopefully. Some people don't have that ability. And when they get to be adults, some people have not honed that skill very much. And when they run companies or they work as a manager for a company and have teams that they have to deal with, it hurts them if they don't understand that and become self-aware. But the good thing about that is it's one of those skills that you can get better at.
Dr. Stevie?
I think emotional intelligence is not only the self-awareness part, as Valerie said, but also it's about knowing how to listen to people and how to realize that your emotions impact every conversation you have. And so the best thing you can do is really think through that emotional intelligence before you open your mouth and talk to somebody, so that you're being not only self-aware but listening to the highest level possible.
I think, sometimes when we listen, we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. And I think what Stevie said is, that art of listening can be learned. It's very good. But it's also, when you listen effectively, then you connect with people. And that's a big portion of emotional intelligence.
Seems like emotional intelligence is a fairly new word, if you will. And I've been around for a while, but it seems like we're now, where is it going? How's the conversation starting, and where do you all see emotional intelligence? I'm seeing more tweets about it. I'm seeing a lot more dialogue.
Well, I think it started in 1996 with Daniel Goleman. He was the first person to really coin the term. and bring it into the business world and talk about how soft skills, which is what we sometimes say, are important in business. We have to get along, that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses, right, Chuck? I think that's part of it. So it really started in 1996. I think you're seeing it more now because companies are struggling more and more with retaining good talent. Chuck, what do you think?
Oh, I think you're exactly right. When we first started with our training program when I was in the corporate world, we had lost 29 product managers in 1 year. And when we got digging and finding out why did they leave, they weren't leaving the industry, they were going to work for the competition. And the reason they were, like Steve had said, there wasn't a connection. So we started with 19 different vice presidents from different countries, different cultures. That was our first test of a 2-day training program. We made such an impact on those vice presidents, they wanted us to take it down to the business unit manager level, down the country manager level. We went all the way down to sales and product manager levels. So it had an impact on the business. And then we went to the US, we went to South America, and over to Europe.
Emotional intelligence, that's where we really start. Now, my question is it measurable? Can we measure emotional intelligence? Because I think of the times when I am emotionally intelligent, and I think the times when catastrophe, tragedy, how do people react in certain, so are there tools to measure? Because as an employer, I'm now, that buzzwords come up, and I want to find the people that are emotionally intelligent. Is that a measurable tool?
There are a number of different things, and they are, it depends on your school of thought whether you think that particular tool is good or another one is good. We use TTI, which is it measures, part of the assessment measures 24 skills that they have, whether it's interacting with people, negotiations, the ability to predict, etc. And you can see those move as a person gets more training, is more mature, goes through the years, so that you've got people that start off with attenuated measurements in those, but over the years with training and just the life happening to them, they get better and better in all of those areas. So you can see that move, and is trainable.
Stevie?
Yeah, I think when I did my dissertation research, we studied it, we tested for it, and we looked to see if there was movement, as Valerie said, over the year of our program. And there is. So there are tests that can be done, there are assessments and tools. I think the thing that really keeps coming up in the emotional intelligence research is all of the tools are self-assessment, right? Do I believe I'm emotionally intelligent? And I think that there's a lot of scientists who would say that's not good enough. We need something a little more rigorous. And so the field is still working on it. I don't know that there's a perfect instrument, but there's lots of good ones out there. And I think employers should use whatever instruments you can find to evaluate employees to the best of your ability so you can track their progress, because I think that's important as a business owner to do that.
From my perspective, there's a practical way of measuring that, and that's through role playing. Taking people, putting them into difficult situations and see how they respond. And you can watch the learning curve very easily when they're in those types of situations.
Yeah. That's interesting. As far as, and it's also when I think about emotional intelligence, a lot of times I go back to Stephen Covey, values versus emotions, right? And so often that when I think of emotional intelligence, that's the first thing that comes to mind. When you all think of emotional intelligence, or when you try to define it, because a lot of times it is an oxymoron, right? When I talk to people, let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, one thing that, one of the reasons that we started doing that high impact manager training, which is not leadership training, it's the people that are down in the teams and running the teams, and if I'm a leader, I want to hand it off to somebody that's very competent, so high impact manager training. Those 24 modules all incorporate this into the module, where the people are becoming aware through the module of what they say, what they do, how their actions impact others. So we don't say you're learning emotional intelligence, we just teach them that skill, and it moves that needle. It does make a difference to them. By the time they finish, they have clicked up definitely to a new level and awareness, because it's self-awareness that you have this ability and you need to use it.
Well, and also I think it's self-development, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're all about, if we're wanting to sharpen saw or get better, we know what emotional intelligence is. And when we say to someone, what is emotional intelligence, or what does it mean to you, and they kind of give you that funny look.
Yeah. I get that every day. Being an emotional intelligence expert, I get that every day. Every time I say, I teach emotional intelligence, and people go, huh? You know, I think for me, it's really about making people understand that it's really about communication. In the end, it's about connecting with people, it's about communicating with people, and it's about being aware of yourself and aware of others, and that people are going through things every moment of every day, and it impacts us. It impacts our relationships, it impacts our business dealings. And so while I don't think there's one perfect definition for emotional intelligence that everybody can agree on, I think everybody I talk to, at least when I say emotional intelligence and they give me the funny look, I can always say, well, it's about communication.
Right.
And it's about understanding how to talk to people. And then everybody's on the same page, everybody sees the value. So
Right.
I do think that's a part of it.
Sure.
No, and I think part of it is understanding your emotions and understanding how emotions control your life through what we call default behaviors. And there's about 5 basic unmet emotions, that emotional needs that we have, that if we aren't comfortable in those situations, our brain's going to react in a default behavior that's really quite amazing. You know, we talk about things like safety or respect, even acceptance. You know, we talk about acceptance with teenagers, you know, with peer pressure, but my gosh, look at adults. You know, we have to have the right car, the right, you know, the right house. You know, we have to send our kids to the right schools. I mean, all of
So
that
much
is
worse than teenagers.
Exactly. And so, but it's understanding how our brain controls our actions because of our emotions.
So true.
I sort of say it's that it's the limbic brain, which is your reptilian brain, that kicks in, and when that kicks in, you may be in trouble.
Absolutely.
You're watching, we're talking about effective communication through emotional intelligence. Please follow the conversation at YEI. We're looking for your feedback and your thoughts and how that all kind of lays out, because I think it's such a fascinating topic, and I think it's so interesting to talk to different people when you really think about emotional intelligence. Now, the one thing that has really come into mind is that when I think of emotional intelligence is that it's a very emotional state right now. So if we're dialed into social media, television, radio, we are constantly engulfed with emotional content.
Yes.
Alrighty, with things going on, especially with the media right now, gives me goosebumps from a standpoint. So how do we take what's in our world, if you will, this paradigm of emotions that's thrown at us, and be emotionally intelligent every day? Chuck?
Well, that's a good question, Chris. The you know, I think there's a part of that is, you know, if you can understand your own emotions and can kind of realize how your behavior is affected, then when you get responses, when you're on social media or you're watching the news, what have you, and you see different things, you can keep yourself in the game. And that's one of the things that I teach is, you know, you've heard the expression, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Well, sometimes that's when you have to perform your best, is when you're in that hot kitchen. So I teach people how to take a step back, regroup, and then walk back into that kitchen more powerfully than before.
Yeah. You know, I think social media is definitely an issue right now for emotional intelligence, because people are putting a lot of emotion behind those words that they post. And when you think about it, words by themselves are not supposed to have emotion. That's something you get from the human itself, from the communication, from the voice and the body language. And so by putting so much emotion in just pure words and putting them on a screen, it's really easy for people to take things the wrong way, to feel the hot seat or to feel an emotional response to something. And a lot of times we take it the wrong way. We don't necessarily take it the way the person meant it. And so I think for me, emotional intelligence, I think taking a step back is always a part of that. Taking a deep breath before you hit that reply on that email is always a good thing. But then also it's about just realizing that everybody is entitled to feel however they want to feel. And that validation and that empathy towards others that I think we need to remind ourselves to do every day, is to empathize and validate that somebody else is allowed to be upset or mad or sad about something that I'm not. That's okay. We're all different, and that's what makes us human.
Right. And there's no tonality in text.
Nope. No.
Well, the younger, there's a whole new emoji world emerging out there, where if somebody is happy, he puts a picture of Queen Latifah dancing, and that's what they put out there. And we, as I work with business owners who are who don't have to, they are delighted to employ younger people in there, because that's our future, and we need to develop them. But there's a disconnect in the communication style, and so that the owner really and the managers really need to understand themselves, and teaching those younger folks to understand themselves and how to communicate,
Right.
how to listen and communicate to the people that they are like, well, why don't you want me to send emojis to our vendors, just like
Yeah.
it's that's going to be a real challenge. I'm sure it's been a challenge throughout since caveman times, trying to get
Get the younger people on
Mhm.
talking
On
the
the
same
same
language, right?
language, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, always a hard one.
All right, so we're going to roll this live on actually Twitter right now, and the question is, make sure we're on set. Will things change from an emotional point of view? Go landscape, stop and turn the camera where it's landscape, please. So we're going to ask the question again. And what we want to do is that because I don't see things getting better, right? I almost see things kind of intensifying, especially if I turn on the news. So the question is in relation to media, do we see things changing? Do we become more emotionally intelligent through media, which I think affects all of us?
I think I would recommend people read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. He's an economist, and he has an infographic which you can, if you don't want to read this book, which is excellent. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, and he talks about people consuming media. One of his things that is a big problem is people thinking that thing that they're reading about all the time or hearing all the time is actually happening, and it's going to affect them, and it's statistically has nothing to do with their life. So I would recommend that for people to tone that down.
I do think it's changing. I think I don't want to say it's getting worse. I think that's a negative tone to put on it. But I do think it's changing. I think people are just taking in a lot more media than they ever have before. It's at our fingertips, literally, and we take it in. And I think it's about making sure that, to Valerie's point, when you read the news or when you see something on the media, that you internalize, is this impacting me? Is this something impacting my life? Or is this something that it's impacting society, and I can feel empathy, I can feel sadness, I can feel concern for people. And if nothing else, one of the things that the media has given us lately is the opportunity to donate. People are getting behind causes and getting behind nonprofits and donating and making social change. And that's a great thing, and I think that comes from that emotion that's played through the media, and we're taking it in and we're doing something about it in a positive way. So I hope that part continues.
Well, I think you bring up a good point there. One of the things that's just amazing about the brain is there's two emotions that the brain cannot hold at the same time. And what's really interesting is we're only born with two fears. And it's not mother-in-laws and it's not taxes. We're born with the fear of falling, and we're born with the fear of loud noises. Every other fear we have is a learned fear. And so one of the things that's interesting is that your brain cannot hold fear and gratitude at the same time. So if you find something that you're grateful for, like volunteering and doing some social work, doing those types of things where you're grateful for things, you eliminate the fear. And I think another thing that goes with that, which I teach, is be still. Just find a time in the day to just be still a little bit and be grateful. And it's amazing how it'll change your entire mood.
Yeah.
Okay. First, let's roll another Twitter question, if you will, for Chuck. Chuck, having trained in 40 countries around the world, do you think one country is more, or one region is more emotionally intelligent than another?
That's a very good question. With all the training that I've done, there are only two countries that people did not receive or accept emotional intelligence well, and that was Japan and South Korea. But every other country, when we did our training in Asia the very first time, where we had 19 different vice presidents, they were different religions, different civilizations. It was fascinating, and they all got it. It was really, really interesting.
Interesting.
Very good. We are onward and upward. We are covering emotional intelligence. Follow us at YEI. Please shoot all video landscape that we're shooting for Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Follow us at Fort Worth Today. We're talking about emotional intelligence with our experts today. Thank you all for being here. Fascinating subject. Okay, so we kind of broke it down. We talked about the different countries. We've talked about the oxymoron. Let's talk about it from a deal-making standpoint. Because how do we become, especially in small business, right?
Right.
We all have our own business. So I know a lot of times when it comes into negotiating, a lot of times those emotions can take over, especially when it comes to money. So how can we become more emotionally intelligent as business owners?
Training, definitely.
Training.
Study, negotiations, study, because if you walk through that, you fall in that hole, the teacher explains that hole, you get out of the hole, and now you see the hole, and you walk around it. You come up with ways to not fall in the hole. And we had one business owner that was so bad at, for example, negotiations. We fired him from doing anything to do with money with his firm, and his chief of staff did all of it. Any kind of negotiations or anytime they talked about money, Kyle left and she took over, and she did a great job with it. Money wasn't an emotional thing to her. So.
I think that's funny, Valerie's saying that. I am not that person that she's talking about, but I am that person. I have also been fired from being able to quote pricing and do business dealings and negotiations with clients because I do have an emotional attachment to money. And I think a lot of us do. A lot of us have an emotional attachment to money and emotional attachment to business, especially as business owners. And so I also am told not to quote anything or promise anything. I have to check with a much more logical, analytical brain before I'm allowed to do that. But I do think emotional intelligence comes into play because it is that emotional, whatever emotion you feel in terms of money. So to Chuck's earlier point about gratitude and fear, right? If some of us fear, that concept of money and asking for money and putting a price tag on our services. So if that fear is there, we're not grateful for what we've already accomplished and what we already have, correct?
Right.
And so that makes it a very emotionally intelligent thing then when you are doing deals to really take that step back, be more aware of your emotions, what your emotion is around money, and trying to flip that script, right?
That's very interesting. One of the things that I teach and talk about is chemical brain freeze, and I'll keep it real simple, but you've ever been so mad you couldn't think straight? That's a chemical brain freeze. But we talk about that, and when I'm talking with salespeople, I'll share this story with them. It's like, why don't we pick up the phone and call our customers? Instead we tweet, but there's a part of our brain called the amygdala it's like a radar system. It's going beep, 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 looking for anything out of the ordinary. And what it will do is if you reach over to pick up the phone and say, wait, what are you doing? What if you don't have all the answers that customer may ask? What if there's dead space? You're going to be an idiot. Hang up. Send them a text message. Send them an email. And we wind up doing that. I sold my house a couple of years ago, and what the first transaction went bad, and so the listing ran out, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I get a phone call, and the guy said, "Now, Mr. Inman, my name's Paul Tisello. I'm a realtor in the area. I saw that your listing had ran out, and I was just curious if you were, what you were going to do. Were you going to lease it? Did you sell it successfully?" And we had a short conversation. He said, "I can run some numbers for you if you'd like." And I said, "Sure." And so he came over that afternoon with some numbers. We wound up selling the house, and he made over $35,000 in commissions. But what was fascinating, I started keeping material for him on the different mailings that I got. I got postcards, I got letters, I got packages, everything about how all these realtors could help me sell my house. I had a whole box. I had over 70 pieces of literature that came through the mail on how these people could help me. Guess how many phone calls I had? One.
Yeah.
And he made $35,000 on that phone call. So when I ask salespeople at the end of what's the most important thing that you're going to do in the next 2 months, making phone calls is the number one thing they always write down.
It's interesting to hear you all kind of talk about it, because I think once again it goes back to that kind of small business mentality. And the first thing that comes to mind is my right-brainers, right? They're very good at what they do, but they're very emotional, and it's managing them. And a lot of us are into self-development, and a lot of us can invest in that, but for some people that's not really a priority. And what we're really trying to do with these experts is provide teachable moments, right? How can we help people in their business be more emotionally intelligent? And I think one thing is starting the conversation, right?
Focus on it.
Focus. How do we start the conversation within our small groups? We don't have 25 employees, right? A lot of times we're dealing with our partners, with our customers. A lot of times my customers aren't necessarily emotionally intelligent. How can I better educate my employees, my partners, and my customers rather than telling them, you need to go to training. You're not emotionally intelligent. Because everyone I talked to over the last 3 days, 35 people, no one said they were not emotionally. Everyone's emotionally intelligent. Chuck?
Well, especially small business, an easy way to do that. Daniel Goldman wrote back in 1996, he wrote an article for Harvard Business Review called What Makes a Good Leader, or What Makes a Leader. And in that, he talks about what emotional intelligence is, and it's one of the better articles written. As a matter of fact, it's Harvard Business Review's, it's their most popular reprint of all time, and it walks through all the steps. It's very easy to have small group discussions with that.
Stevie Don?
I think bringing it into your staff meeting, I think through an article or something, even with my staff, I have a small staff, but we also do a take the pulse every day, which is just kind of a go around the room and how's everybody feeling today? I think that question of how are we feeling today is an important part of that emotional intelligence conversation. And if I notice my team isn't feeling so great, I need to change as a leader what I'm saying and how I'm communicating because they're not going to take it the same way. So I also think not only through bringing in articles and reading into the staff meeting, but even just a simple question of how are you feeling today and how can I help you?
Absolutely.
We start all of our board meetings of the business owners with, what are you grateful for today? What's happened that you feel that you want to share with everybody that's gone on in your life that means something to you? And it changes your brain chemistry. I start my training groups with that. I go, I know it's stressful. It's hard for you guys to get here for this. Everybody's in the boardroom now, and we're just going to take a quick minute and we're going to talk about the thing that you are grateful for. And just one of them the other day was, I don't live in Ventura County in California, and my business and my house aren't on fire. You know, it can be small things, but it breaks that ice. It gets our brain working in a positive direction.
We are talking about effective communication through emotional intelligence. We've been breaking it down over the last half hour. We've had a great session. We've talked about the role in media, which I think plays a huge part each and every day. I know I'm going to watch the Cowboy game. What emotions will I play during that?
Well, I've already missed the first couple minutes now, so I'm already nervous about it.
We've talked about business. How do you become more EI when it comes to business? Follow the conversation at YEI. Let's start that dialogue. But to me, the most important thing when it comes to emotional intelligence today that affects each and every one of us every single day is online. How do we become more emotionally intelligent online? We're going to kick it into high gear here because it affects my banking. There's catfishing. I have hacking. I have ID theft. All my information is online. I do social. I do everything online. How do we become, you each have 1 minute. You'll hear something like this if you go over that minute. And then the next person. We're in our down run. Let's start with Stevie Don.
Okay, how do I be more emotionally intelligent online? I think realize that words do not have emotion. They don't. They are just words. And I think we need to realize that and take that for what it is. I think we need to not read between the lines and not try and search for hidden meaning behind everything that we hear and everything that we read. We need to really take people at their word. I know that's trusting people, and maybe that's a little too much for online, but we need to do a little bit more of that. I think when it comes to putting information online, realize that it is a dangerous place sometimes, and you need to put out information. I always say put out information your grandma be okay with seeing, because that's who's going to see it, and make sure that you're protecting yourself in that way. Don't put emotion online. That's not where it is. Pick up the phone, have a face-to-face conversation. That's where we need emotion.
Here we go, Chuck.
Well, I think one of the things, I think Stevie had it nailed. It's, you know, then sometimes when you see something that gets you upset, stop what you're doing. I mean, stop and take a deep breath, and kind of, because your brain's telling you you're going to have a chemical brain freeze the way that you react to it. So stop and take a deep breath. Think of some things that you're grateful for, and then when you go back to them, you know, and you've got your thinking back in place, reach out and ask the one question I think defines more for emotional intelligence and connecting with people. Help me understand. Help me understand just a little bit more the point that you're trying to make. And then don't listen to reply, listen to understand. And that takes a lot to make that happen.
Excellent. Valerie, go ahead.
All right. I think that those are very wise words from both of you. I would say take a break, which is an old technique. it's an old technique where you don't reply that moment, you don't send that email that moment, you wait until the next morning and then you read it again, and you'll read into it how that other person, because you're not in that emotional moment right that second. So take a break. That is one thing you can absolutely put into effect today.
We've been talking about effective communication through emotional intelligence. I would like to find out, these people are going to want to learn from you. They want to follow you. Chuck, where can we find you? We can find you, what's your handles? Inman Chuck on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Known Chuck for many, many years. He's going to be great for you. Stevie Don?
You can find me at Dr. Stevie Don altogether, or at Orange Compass. And any of those, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I've got them all. So find me anywhere.
Do you want to add anything else, Chuck? I didn't mean to say.
Chuckinman.com.
There you go.
And we're all on LinkedIn.
Yes.
So go and read those profiles. These people are here to help you and connect the dots. Valerie?
Valerie Riefenstahl on LinkedIn is probably the best place to go for me, as well as my website, roiassociatesllc.com. LinkedIn has lots of ways to contact me. It has my telephone number in there, as well as my email. So
You have been watching Effective Communication Through Emotional Intelligence. I want to thank you all for being with us and contributing. I felt like we have a great session. Now we're going to go out of bounds, and we'll be out of bounds live on YouTube and on Twitter here in about 5 minutes. We'll talk about our most talked about topic where we feel like that's really trending. We'll have a little session that's really good, and that's called Out of Bounds. We'll knock that out real quick. Thank you for being here every week on Inside Fort Worth Business on Fort Worth Today. Follow the conversation at YEI hashtag. I'm so proud of myself coming up with that hashtag. Thank you, Chris Yates, Social Media Marketer of the Year, for helping me put this program together and figuring out the best way to push that out. I want everyone to have a great day. Everyone, go Cowboys, and I look forward to seeing you. I'm Chris Quinn for Inside Fort Worth Business. Thank you, Twitter.